Hello again, here we are. Second week running, it's very nice to have you all here. Welcome to our second interview in our series of fantastic interviews. And this morning we have a very interesting guest. If Worry wasn't quite doing it for you last week, today we have, well, let's see, in the times where, you know, this sort of where there's blame there's a claim sort of culture, compensation claims, all that stuff, forgiveness doesn't really get an awful lot of airtime, so that's going to change this morning. We have our second world exclusive, remember, interview. Mr Forgivness in person.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Nice to see you. There's a bit of noise going on somewhere.
Nice to see you.
I forgive you for that.
That's all right.
It's still doing it though. Do we have a technical crew on standby to...
That's, yeah, it'd be right.
Oh, you say
I keep still.
I can't imagine you keeping still. Right, anyway. So I understand you've been extremely busy in recent months, particularly in the Middle East, is that right?
I wish, but sadly not, I'm afraid, no.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must be misinformed. My researchers have obviously failed on this one, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's no problem, that's what I do. I forgive you.
Oh, good, of course. Speaking of that, could you sum up for us, in a nutshell, what exactly it is you do? Give us your mission statement, if you will.
Well, I exist. I want to encourage people to give up the desire or power to punish.
So I guess what you're saying is kind of leave the eyes and the teeth be, instead of an eye for an eye, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Old Testament.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And is it true that a large part of that work has to do with punishing oneself?
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly enough, a lot of forgiveness has to do with forgiving yourself, which is a huge task, you know, often underestimated. You know, a lot of people I meet, they are literally their own worst enemy. And no matter what you do or where you go, you always take yourself with you, of course. So it's like a disaster if you're your own worst enemy. Some people punish themselves continuously for years for something that they did or didn't do.
Yeah, but surely to err is human?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all make mistakes. You know, that goes without saying, I think. All of us, apart from me, of course, I don't make mistakes at all.
Well, no, because you're an abstract concept. I'm not sure an abstract concept can actually make mistakes.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, humans make mistakes, right? Some big, some small, it doesn't really matter. It's not a question of if you make a mistake, but when. So the important thing, seems to me, is how to deal with them, how to get over it, basically, how to get over some of the things you've messed up. So the first thing is simply accepting that you committed an error. Now that sounds simple enough and fairly obvious, but self-delusion is a real pain to overcome.
Yes, of course.
You know, I show up in someone's life and say, huh? And they go like, huh? And I'm, hint, and they, what? You know, no idea. They don't even know that there's an issue that they need to get over. And that can carry on for such a long time. Admit, it's a real tough guy.
I didn't realise self-delusion was so trendy. I was like, and I was like, huh? And all that sort of stuff. Sorry.
It's all right. But yeah, it's really tough, you know. And as I say, it can go on for a long time. People just aren't aware that there are issues there because, well, you know.
Yeah, because it's admitting, yeah.
It's admitting, yeah, and that can be really tough. I mean,
yeah.
I can be quite tough. I mean, look at me. I don't look particularly tough, but believe me, at times I can be really tough. I might not come across as such. But
I've heard that, yes. You've got a reputation.
I have. So, you know, when admit is really tough to overcome, I just wait patiently. But once they admit that a mistake has been made, that they've messed up basically, then it's all systems go. Then my work really kicks in. Because the last thing I want for them is to condemn themselves totally for having made a mistake. You know, I messed up here, that means I'm totally bad. I'm all bad. You know, I've lost this job, therefore I am a loser. Or I said something hurtful, so therefore I am a hurtful person. You know, that's not helpful. You know, God loves you, mistakes, warts and all. If He can, so can you.
Yeah, I see that, but that does sound a bit complicated to me. Would it not be better if you were just able to bypass the admit stage altogether and just move straight for forgiveness? Wouldn't that be simpler?
I guess, although, you know, I don't want people to forgive themselves too easily either. It might sound really strange, but I think a bit of pain and a bit of shame can be quite helpful at times. Otherwise, people just move on too quickly and don't actually learn anything from their mistakes. And there's only one thing worse than making mistakes, and that's not learning from them. Because you'll end up having to visit the same mistake again and again and again in the future.
Okay, so I'm guessing from what you're saying that your passion is really to release people for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes way back in my Greek ancestry. They were called aphesis, something sent away, released. That's what we're all about. That's what my family forgiveness is all about. Being sent away and released. Unless I step into a situation, people can end up carrying a really heavy burden.
That's very interesting. I didn't realise that abstract concepts had Greek ancestry. Does that also apply to releasing others then? You know, meaning forgiving others, perhaps?
Yeah, it does. I think that's the second big part of my work. Forgiving others really runs on two tracks. One is releasing others from the burden of you holding a grudge or something more serious, and also releasing you from the burden of holding a grudge or something more serious.
So are they dependent upon each other?
You mean you can't forgive somebody else unless...
Yeah,
I know what you mean. Yeah. You know, the person who wronged you, serious wrong or not, they might never ever show any remorse whatsoever. You know, they might never feel sorry. They might never apologize. If your forgiveness and your release and freedom depends on them, it might never happen. You might never even see them again. They would still have power over you, and quite frankly, a lot of people simply just don't care that they have that kind of power over you.
Could you maybe help us by giving us an example?
Well, I'll give you a trivial one. So imagine it's raining and you're walking home and there's a car that comes and just splashes you top to bottom through a puddle, you know, muddy water and all that.
That's really annoying.
Yeah, you're soaking wet and you're angry because the driver didn't even stop and you didn't get the number plate. Of course you're angry. You know, actually that's the right response to have. You know, it'd be kind of odd if you say, "Oh, good free shower." It's stupid. It's right to be angry. But are you going to get an apology from the driver? Probably not, you know, because he was laughing all the way home, and so were his mates when he told the story in the pub. So what are you going to do with that anger then? You know, forgiveness, I guess, is a way of cutting those ties of saying, you have no right to splash me in the first place, but you also have no right of keeping me angry forever.
So you still acknowledge that the other person was wrong, even though you've sort of kind of put the anger aside, sort of thing?
Yeah, forgiveness is certainly not the same thing as excusing or tolerating. otherwise endorsing what's wrong, you know. But I'm saying, I'm forgiving you, regardless of the fact that you're an idiot, a heartless idiot who waited for me round the corner until I came and stood next to the puddle, and you drove through at speed, and you watched me in the mirror, and, you know, my best codes were, no, sorry. It's a journey.
It is a journey. Apparently you're journeying through a really deep puddle with water. No. So I presume that's even more the case when it involves something far more serious, like somebody dying, being killed.
Very much so. You know, in all honesty, even I can't provide a quick fix. In that sense, I'm very tough. You know, I'm tough to find, and I won't let myself be found too soon either, because there has to be a time of healing that has to take place. And whilst I'm part of that process, I'm no shortcut. You know, I think accepting and living through the sadness and the pain of whatever has been lost, the reality that exists following a trauma, that's the way through. So there's a few stages that people just have to walk through.
Okay, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so there's, I guess in the first instance, there's always denial, you know, that actually didn't happen. It's a way for the brain to just simply say, hang on, I'm not dealing with this right now, I'm going to block this off. I'm not acknowledging that at the moment. Diagnosis is wrong, or there is no problem, there is no addiction, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then really the next stage is anger, where people just, why does that have to happen to me? You know, everybody else gets away with it, but I don't. You know, everybody else is okay, and who's to blame? Find somebody to blame. It's quite a natural thing. And then comes, once you realise that really, you know, sort of just disappears into thin air, there's sort of a bargaining stage, where you say, well, what if I never do anything wrong? What if I will not do that again? Will you let me back in the house? Or if I promise to be a good boy, will I get away with this? If I, you know, they're trying to do a compromise because it's just frustrating and painful, and reality is wrong, so that you try and strike a deal, basically. But of course it's kind of futile, because you can't make certain things just go away by being a good boy or good girl. So that's when depression sets in. It's just realising that reality is crap and it's not going away.
Can we say that word? I can't remember. Can we say it now? We can say it. We'll beep it out on the recording.
It's just terrible, and it's not going away, and it can be very frustrating and very painful to accept that, which is sort of the final step, really. It's accepting, and it's not the case of realizing that everything's going to be okay, because it's probably not going to be okay. But it's the reality, even though that's not okay, but it's accepting that that's the new order of things, and you know, the loved ones physically gone, and recognizing that this reality is going to be permanent, and whether we like it or we don't, or whether we make it okay or don't, it's just accepting it and learning to live with it. And I don't really come into the picture until then, I guess.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thanks for taking us through the stages. So you've got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, did you say? Acceptance?
Yeah.
That's all great, but you are, or at least in some circumstances, you seem to be impossible.
I am. I am impossible. Humanly speaking, I am quite impossible. And you know, I think we sang it in the songs earlier. It's really only when we find God's grace for our own troubles and experience that forgiveness that we can somehow access forgiveness. But
yeah,
I admit I'm quite an impossible person to have around at times.
Well, I think on that note, we'll throw it open to the audience who gathered for this interview. Anybody have any question? Anybody else have? No. Go on, Morris.
Where does revenge come into it then?
Where does revenge come into it?
Some people get satisfaction out of forgiveness, or some people don't have revenge. So what happens then?
Yeah, revenge is an interesting one. Sometimes, I guess it depends who you take the revenge on. You know, some people, something goes wrong and they kick the cat. I don't particularly like cats, so I don't have a problem with it. The question is the force of revenge sometimes is disproportionate. So, you know, for example, with all my work in the Middle East, one person gets killed, they take revenge and kill 10 others. And then, they kill 10 others, let's kill 50 others. You know, they kill one, we'll kill the whole family. You know, I guess, you know, in a nutshell, I'm about giving up the right to punish. And sometimes revenge doesn't do the kind of healing that people expect from it. It doesn't release the anger, it just sort of solidifies it. And then sometimes it just, you know, becomes a perpetual back and forth and back and forth.
Okay. Next
Well,
question.
I read in, I can't remember the girl's name that used to come here, and she showed me a little book that her grandma had written.
Oh,
Kelly.
yes.
And she read from it, Kelly. And I've thought about this quite a few times on different occasions, and it's worked. But it's maybe not quite serious things as what we were just talking about. But it said, a smile is better than revenge. And I think it is sometimes. Somebody's really upset you or annoyed you, instead of being annoyed back at you.
Yeah, you know, I think especially when people annoy you and hurt you on purpose, the best kind of revenge is to say, actually, your attack has no power over me. I forgive you. I'm not going to, you know, qualify it with an angry response, because that's exactly what you want. So I'm taking the wind out of the sails, and I'm not throwing it back at you, and that's kind of almost worse, isn't it, for them?
I suppose it's easier to forgive somebody that's sorry than trying to forgive someone that isn't sorry about what they've done.
I don't think that always matters, though. I think forgiveness is something that has to happen in your own heart. And I think often the need to revenge somebody only ends up hurting you. And often we can forgive somebody in our own heart, and we don't actually even have to see the person, especially if they're not repentant. It makes it very difficult. But in my experience, the person I had to forgive was already dead when I came to forgive them. And so I never got that chance face to face to say to them, you've hurt me and I want you to apologise. But the forgiveness for me came in my own heart, and the first time I said it, I only meant it in my head, and it took a long time. But when I had actually forgiven, the power of the hurt was taken away, and it didn't have to be anything that I did face to face. My dad died not sorry for what he'd done to me, but that didn't become important, because the only thing that my anger was doing was damaging me. And often with forgiveness, the most powerful thing we can do is forgive in our own hearts and allow God to take that statement that comes out of your mouth that you might not mean altogether. You want to mean it, but it might take a long time before it gets to your heart, because in the end, all that revenge does is hurt yourself. It makes it, it's a vicious circle, and it spirals and spirals and spirals, and you're the only one that can break it.
Mandela said an interesting thing. You know, he was in prison for 27 years, on Robben Island, and he said, as I walked out the door, I can't do the accent, I just read it. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison.
Yes.
He'd still be trapped in the anger
I think
and the hurt.
forgiveness isn't always the instant. You have to sometimes keep going back and forgiving. When the thoughts of revenge or hatred or whatever come up, you have to take a conscious step to say, Lord, I forgive, please put this behind me. And you rely on God, but you have to keep going back. And as it rises, you have to say forgiveness again.
Yeah. I mean, I run quite a bit in the morning, and I kid you not, when it's not because I feel like it. You know, if I only ran when I felt like it, I wouldn't run. And when I start running, the first few steps, I usually think this was a bad idea. And about halfway through, I'm thinking, I really would rather be on the sofa right now and eat a packet of crisps. But I know that, you know, it's a decision. It's not my emotional state that makes me want to run. But I do it because afterwards, I feel great. I feel refreshed, my muscles are growing, I'm healthy, I sleep well, I don't get migraines, and so on. But it really is an act of will, not of I feel like it. And I think it's the same with forgiveness.
On the television, he used to show you a man with a black mask on and he'd chop people's heads off. Was it John or somebody?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So what's the best thing to do is to find this man, put him to death, and then forgive him afterwards. You know, or do you just, what do you do, let him go on, what's the position there?
Well, it's so complex, I would think, that whole issue. You know, that's where my work gets really complicated,
Yeah.
because it's not an isolated thing. It's not just two people, you know, there's not just a perpetrator and one person who gets killed. The perpetrator's got a whole nation or a whole philosophical following behind him, or religious following, that if you do one thing to him, it does a whole lot to the others, and then it sometimes even revenge then encourages the others to take a step up. My work really is about breaking that cycle of hate and revenge and killing. And I think if a whole generation made the step of, I give up my power to punish, you know, take Northern Ireland, you know, some of these things, especially when it comes to things like racism and religious attacks and so on, you just can't defeat them with force, with power. You can only defeat them with withdrawal of power, with a withdrawal of feeding of anger. You know, take Gandhi, for example. You know, he had no army. It was, you know, a withdrawal of fighting back.
I think we might just have time for one more.
Yeah, I've had a problem with forgiveness for a lot of years, and I actually changed the word forgiveness to letting go. And I found that is so much more helpful to me to use the word letting go rather than forgiveness, and use all the justice and revenge to whatever government, whatever state, and ultimately God. And so I let go so I can carry on. That doesn't stop the person doing the wrong to me or whoever, but that's for somebody else to deal with. That's not my problem. I've let go.
Yeah, I don't take offence of substituting.
So I've renamed you.
But yeah, you're right. You know, essentially that's what I'm about the ability to let go. And it doesn't change anything in the fact that, you know, some crimes just need to go punished, you know, but the power and the force that comes with it, we can let go.
Yes, I guess you've got to separate the two, because in terms of the way, you know, the world we live in, yeah, there's a process for punishing crimes, and that it doesn't mean we shouldn't do that, but that doesn't deal with the forgiveness side, does it? As you were saying, you know, they're kind of separate things, aren't they?
That's right. You know, and the criminal justice system, is doing a lot of work at the moment where victims meet the perpetrators, or perhaps not of the same crime, but a similar crime, and the reconciliation and the work that's done, because ultimately both are victims. The reoffence rate that comes out of that is far lower than simply locking people away and not dealing with their issues, and then they're released again and carry on doing the same thing.
Okay, very well. Well, thank you, Mr Forgivness, for coming in and talking to us.
Can I just say one more thing to finish?
Yes, I forgive you for interrupting. Yes, go on.
Well done.
But I'm not forgotten.
Well done, my visit was not in vain. Talking of finding forgiveness, we have to find forgiveness in ourselves, for ourselves, because sometimes, we can go on kicking ourselves forever, and it's not healthy, it doesn't lead to anything. But it's also finding forgiveness from God, and that's particularly where confession, not a popular thing, but confession comes in. It can be a real healing process and a purifying process for the soul, because ultimately the relationship between God and us, God and I, God and you, is not about, oh, you did this wrong, there's a tick and that's a cross, and it's not about that. It's not about keeping it. God doesn't keep a tally, but it's about the relationship that's breaking down when mistakes are made. And you will feel that from friendships and partnerships and marriages and so on. But that's where forgiveness really then purifies it and helps us in our restore the relationship between God and us. So I just want to, as we sing a few more songs at the end, to just offer that, use that time just to tell God where you've messed up, perhaps even in the last week, and you will feel that when God hears that, and when you say it to God, when you confess that God actually is faithful, and He will let it go, and you will feel that release in you as well, that once God lets it go, you will feel that power quite miraculously in your life, and you will feel a newfound freedom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.